Imagine getting handcuffed in a courtroom, marched out a side door with no goodbye hug, and dropped into a world where the wrong sentence to the wrong guy can get you stabbed with a toothbrush turned into a knife. No manual, no orientation packet, just you, thousands of strangers who'd rather test you than trust you, and a clock that doesn't care how scared you are. That is day one of prison. And today we're breaking down a survival guide written by Yellowstone creator Taylor Sheridan and former inmate turned gym owner Tom Nelson, called How to Not Die in Prison. Sheridan spent years researching prisons while filming Mayor of Kingstown, using real former inmates as extras. And one reenactment scene was so realistic it sent an actor to the hospital with a panic attack. Nelson lived the real version for years, cycling in and out of California's toughest facilities before finally going straight. Together, they wrote the guide neither of them had when they needed it most. Whether you're endlessly curious, writing a script, or just want to know how the system actually works, here's everything this book teaches about surviving and eventually escaping life behind bars. The authors are blunt about their credentials. Sheridan has never been to prison. His curiosity comes from research and a friendship. Nelson, on the other hand, was what he calls a career criminal. Theft, drugs, violence, repeat, until his last and longest stretch convinced him the lifestyle wasn't worth it. He got clean, got obsessed with fitness, and after release built the largest independent training gym in Los Angeles. When COVID wiped out his business and left him broke with a young daughter to support, Sheridan didn't just loan him money. He remembered a screenplay Nelson had written about his life and turned it into this book instead. The tone throughout is dark, profane, and often very funny, but the underlying message is dead serious. Prison is a survival exercise, and most people go in with zero information. The book opens on the worst day of your life, sentencing. 1 second you're in a courtroom, the next bailiffs are cuffing you and walking you to a van. From there, you'll usually pass through county jail before transferring to your actual facility, and county is described as pure chaos. Overcrowded holding cells packed with people from every walk of life, most of them scared, some of them dangerous, none of them explaining the rules to you. The authors give readers a prison readiness score, a self-assessment covering things like physical fitness, ability to read social situations, temper control, and street smarts, a tongue-in-cheek but genuinely useful gut check on how prepared you actually are. There's also a section they call the Prisoner's Bill of Rights, spelling out what protections you actually retain even after you've lost your freedom, because most incoming inmates have no idea where the legal lines actually sit. Then come the core survival commandments for your first days. Speak as little as possible until you understand the social map. Pay close attention to everything around you. Establish a routine immediately. Keep to people who share your background or interests, but also know when you have to stand up for yourself, because backing down once invites a lifetime of being targeted. The book also warns against becoming institutionalized, meaning so adapted to prison rhythms that the outside world starts to feel foreign, and it flags avoiding weapons entirely as a baseline rule, since simply being caught near one can add years to a sentence. There's even a minute-by-minute walkthrough of what an average day looks like from wake-up count to lights out, so nothing catches you off guard. The section closes with a glossary of prison slang, because walking and not knowing what a fish, a celly, or a shot caller is will get you laughed at, or worse. This part is essentially a crash course in prison social engineering. It starts with the golden rule. Your cellmate can make or break your entire sentence. So how you handle that relationship in the first hours matters enormously. Negotiating personal space, noise, and boundaries without triggering conflict. Then comes the yard, described as the most information-dense and dangerous square footage in the entire facility. New inmates are told to watch their step, literally learn the physical layout, and figure out who actually holds power, because it's rarely the loudest guy. Respect, in this world, is currency, and the book stresses that minding your own business is a survival skill, not weakness. It also spells out just how aware a fish, prison slang for a new inmate, needs to be of their vulnerable status early on. There's a detailed breakdown of the racial and gang dynamics that structure most American prisons, covering groups like the Nazi lowriders, the Bloods, and the Crips, and how these divisions dictate who you can associate with, whether you like it or not. The authors note that alliances can shift in surprising ways when a common threat appears. Rival gangs setting aside differences to face an outside enemy together, while other groups, like MS-13 and 18th Street, will never align no matter the circumstances. The authors are careful to explain this isn't the world's morality, it's the world's reality, and ignoring it gets people hurt. From there, practical guidance. How to stay under the radar and avoid becoming a target for boredom-driven violence. What write-ups and disciplinary boards actually mean for your time. How to file a formal grievance if staff cross a line. What happens when a dispute escalates all the way to being sent back to court. And an eye-opening look at just how much dirty money and corruption flows through supposedly locked-down institutions. From guards smuggling contraband to officers looking the other. Wafer price. Once you've learned to survive, the book pivots to something almost entrepreneurial. How to actually build a life inside. Because Commissary is essentially the only legal marketplace available. Having a skill people want becomes real currency. The authors break down legitimate prison jobs, kitchen work, yard crew, tier tender, and joint venture programs that pay actual wages and can earn you good time credit toward release. Then it gets into the underground economy, and this section is genuinely wild. Cooking elaborate custom meals with smuggled ingredients, tattooing with homemade guns built from stolen motors, and ink made from burned plastic soaked in soap and water. Cutting hair, acting as informal jailhouse legal counsel for inmates who can't afford real representation, running bootleg operations, being a mule who smuggles goods between blocks, and yes, distilling alcohol. The book actually walks through the improvised chemistry of a jailhouse hooch operation, right down to fermentation timing and how to build a crude still, along with a whole section on making a homemade electrical stinger to heat water and cook food in a cell. It also covers the underground tobacco trade, how commissary economics work when cash itself isn't allowed, and how prices get set for everything from ramen to phone minutes. It's presented almost like an underground business manual, equal parts fascinating and cautionary. Knowledge the authors clearly don't want anyone to have to learn the hard way. This is the darkest section of the book, opening with the 1980 New Mexico State Penitentiary riot, one of the most violent prison uprisings in American history, where inmates turned on each other with horrifying brutality after taking guards hostage. It's used to set up the reality that riots and lockdowns happen, and survival means knowing how to get low, get out of sight lines, and wait out. From there, the book gets remarkably practical and, frankly, unsettling. How to survive a full lockdown when movement across the facility freezes for days or weeks. How to send a secret note, or kite, between inmates without staff intercepting it. How items get smuggled inside the body. A technique the authors dryly call the fine art of hiding things in your butt. And profiles of America's most notorious high-security facilities, including ADX Florence in Colorado, USP Beaumont in Texas, Attica in New York, and Orleans Parish Prison in Louisiana, nicknamed collectively Gladiator School for how brutal they are. There's a step-by-step breakdown of how to win a physical fight in a confined space, including how a shiv gets improvised from everyday materials like toothbrushes and melted plastic, plus a blunt note on why firearms almost never factor into prison violence. It also covers what to do if you learn there's a hit out on you, and closes with a long, harrowing look at solitary confinement. Both the psychological toll of extended isolation and concrete strategies for keeping your mind intact when you're locked in a box the size of a parking space for 23 hours a day. Part 5 swaps violence for a different threat: your body. The authors compare prison sanitation to a public health disaster waiting to happen and walk through exactly what incarceration does to your physical health over time, from disease spread to the mental toll of the environment. Because real medical care is often slow or unavailable, there's a full section on becoming your own doctor, basic wound care with whatever's on hand, and even makeshift tooth extraction methods some inmates have resorted to when dental care wasn't coming anytime soon. It covers surviving extreme cold in poorly heated cell blocks, personal hygiene, and shower safety. The book doesn't shy away from the old joke about not dropping the soap. treating it as a genuine safety issue rather than a punchline, and stretching food into something nutritious in what the authors call a literal food desert, since fresh produce is scarce and processed carbs dominate the menu. There's even a mini commissary cookbook with real recipes contributed by former and current inmates, including a pozole recipe, a breakfast meat sandwich, a mix-and-match chicken chili, a makeshift pizza, and a sweet and spicy rice bowl, all built from instant noodles, snack packets, and whatever else the commissary sells. There's also a section on formally reporting egregious health and sanitation conditions through the proper channels rather than just suffering through them. This section wraps with fitness, complete bodyweight routines covering push-ups, pull-ups, dips, bicep curls, sit-ups, squats, lunges, and cardio and stretching, since a gym membership isn't exactly on offer. The authors argue that whatever landed you in prison, impulse control, addiction, anger, you're now surrounded by thousands of people with the exact same struggles in an environment built to make it worse. This section covers how to avoid ending up in the psych ward and lays out a genuine mental health toolbox. Exercise, reading, meditation, counseling, art therapy, and journaling, all framed as legitimate coping tools rather than soft options. For inmates seeking meaning, there's a section on faith and religious community as a stabilizing force, alongside an honest look at activities the authors consider a genuine waste of time. And because idle time is dangerous time, the book covers healthier distractions, hitting the books through education and library programs, arts and crafts like soda can sculpture and other improvised art, and structured recreation, including full illustrated rules for prison classics like Pinochle, War, and Spades, right down to the informal signals players use to cheat without getting caught. There's also a darkly entertaining rundown the authors call the Escaped Inmates Hall of Fame, profiling history's most famous prison breaks, framed less as inspiration and more as a reminder of just how rarely it actually works out. This section shifts focus outward to everyone your sentence affects besides you. The authors don't sugarcoat it. Your family absorbs real financial and emotional damage while you're gone, and children of incarcerated parents carry that weight for life. The book offers concrete guidance for salvaging relationships from inside, navigating visiting day, staying in consistent contact through calls and letters, and optimizing care packages within facility rules. There's a section on prison pen pal programs, which the book presents as a genuine source of connection and, sometimes, financial and emotional support from people on the outside willing to write in. And two of the more emotionally heavy topics get real space. How to cope with losing a loved one while you're locked up and physically unable to attend a funeral or say goodbye, and how to actually parent from behind bars, staying present and consistent through letters and calls even when you physically can't be there, because the authors are blunt that a child with an incarcerated parent carries that absence for the rest of their life, whether the parent manages it well or not. The final part opens with a sobering statistic. Roughly 2/3 of released inmates are rearrested within 2 years, and that number climbs past 80% within a decade. The system, the authors argue, isn't built to set people up for success, so getting out and staying out takes deliberate effort. This section covers how to actually prepare for and face a parole board, what building a case for early release or appeal realistically looks like, and the practical, disorienting reality of your first day of freedom, from useless prison-issued clothes to the small culture shock of a world that moved on without you. The book closes with the honest truth about reentry. Rebuilding a resume, rebuilding trust, and rebuilding a life, all while carrying a record that follows you everywhere. The final message is simple and pointed. Staying out is a full-time job, and it's harder than surviving the sentence itself. What makes How to Not Die in Prison Land is that it refuses to romanticize any of this. It's crude, it's blunt, and it doesn't pretend prison builds character. What it offers instead is information, the exact thing Tom Nelson didn't have walking in the first time, and the thing this book exists to hand to the next person who needs it. Whether you ever set foot inside a facility or not, it's a brutal, unfiltered window into a system millions of Americans live inside every single day. If you found this breakdown useful, let me know in the comments and subscribe for more book summaries every week.